Hello, this is Janet Gowan welcoming you to Love Letters Live. Today's guest is Sterling Mire, a woman I'm just meeting for the first time, but I did know a little bit about. And Sterling, I'm going to why don't you start off telling us the name of your book?
Okay. So the name of my book is The AOM System, Manifestation Mastery in 30 Days.
Okay, now my first question, I was curious about this because of the title. It seems huge. It seems very far reaching. And I know that you are an actress.
Mm-hmm.
And what made you go? I'm guessing sometimes there's a personal crisis or realization or just flat out epiphany that makes a person change from one career to that of helping others find their way. Was
I
this
love
for
your
you?
I love this question. I really do. And not many people even ask me. So I'm going to put this in a little
I mean, what?
I'm going to put it in a little nutshell. Okay. So
Yeah.
when I was very young, approximately 3 or 4 or so, I knew I wanted to live an extraordinary life, but I didn't know what that meant. Right. So there I was, like, I felt very connected to, if you could call it, like, the truths of life. I understood a lot of things, but I doubted myself because I took what my parents tried to tell me. And, I remember having a knowing about something, and then my mother would say, oh, it's like this. And I would think, well, maybe I'm wrong because she's been around longer. She's an adult, so she would know. So I just took it for face value. But I found that a lot of the things that I was taking from society and parents and teachers, et cetera, were actually just not working. And that little knowing still was there, kind of wrestling with the two, right? So I was like, that's not quite it. So I think that I was accepted into Arts Magnet. That's a magnet school, kind of like Fame, the old TV show where you kind of
Right.
audition and you were accepted. So I went down that route because I just felt like those people seemed to be coming from a place of truth or an understanding that just the typical society wasn't. So I felt like I belonged there, and
So
I did that.
that's how you got into acting.
That's
How
how
did,
I got
how
into
did you get
acting.
out of acting?
So I got into that, and I realized that, well, this isn't quite it. And so I spent a year in college studying psychology, and I realized that wasn't it. That was before, I was acting full time. And then I got an offer to do music. Well, I grew up with musicians, and my grandfather was a musician. My dad was a musician. So I thought, well, this is a great opportunity. It feels like it's home to me. So I did that for a while. And all the while, the material that I was writing was very message oriented, meant to really enlighten people. But then I took a break from that. From touring. I was doing a European tour, and I took a break, and I said, I got to step back. I got to look and see where I'm going. Do I want to continue this? So I took a year off, and I'm going to just backtrack. Prior to that, I had created my system for myself.
Okay, so that it was kind of a natural flow. It wasn't some
That's right.
shattering, disturbing, horror. Okay, that's a nice path to follow.
Yes.
I want to ask you, you are just a girl after my own heart because I see that one of the things that you talk about is writing letters uh, to pick what you said 33 people to write letters to. We're going to talk about this, but I want to know. Well, I want to know a lot of things. Can we talk about letter writing? What made you pick 33 people to write a letter to forgive yourself, right?
Yeah, and forgive them.
Yes.
Well, it's very easy, as you, for me, and it should be for anybody else. When you're reflecting on your life, as I did, and I was like, how do I feel about this? See, our entire reality is really a makeup and a product of our relationships, and we have a relationship to everything. When I say relationships, they think like, love relationship or parents or something. No, we have a relationship to every single thing we perceive.
Right. And I have always part of the basis of what I do and how I started with love letters was I know, and I'm seeing that you do too, that every single experience in life, whether it's a good one, a neutral one, a funny one, or a really damaging, horrific one, has the seeds within it of a love letter to someone.
Yes.
And, you know, most love letters, in my experience that I do, are not romantic, although some are great. And they're, you know, forgiveness and forgiving yourself. If the only person you can think of to write a love letter to is yourself, do it to get you through some of those horrible moments that you go on and hear. So I was so glad. Why did you pick 33 people?
Well, that was just the number that I came up with, that I felt that I had a disempowering relationship too. So I made a list, I made a list, and that's what happened. I ended up with 33 that I knew at that moment that I needed to transform those relationships from disempowering to empowering.
And you've written to yourself also, as well as others?
Well, that's part of the exercise that I perform and that my clients perform. Is it encompasses, what's the experience of the relationship, and an experience is just a perceived perception. It's not necessarily truth, and then we move into forgiving and why choosing forgiveness, and what is actually the truth versus what is the untruth, and distinguishing those things. And then we move on to like
Okay,
forgiving ourselves.
I want to talk about forgiveness and what that means, because I
Yeah,
don't understand. You know, people seem to be a little confused that if you forgive, you have to say it's okay.
that's right.
Not true.
Right.
I mean, forgiving, as I see it, is not dwelling on it any longer.
Yeah.
How do you see? And by the way, I'm excuse me, I'm very, very firm on all forgiveness letters. You have to forgive, I think, without using the word forgive.
Yeah.
In, in,
Yeah.
in what I encourage, because when you're the forgiver, you somehow set yourself. So it's a real art to forgive
That's right.
the letter without saying, I forgive you. How would you go about that?
I love that you're talking about this, because most people really do not understand apologizing, the art of apologizing
I
and forgiving.
know. It is such an art. And by the way, it's one of the most elegant forms of a love letter. Go ahead. How do you do it? You're forgiving
Well,
somebody even for something horrible that was done to you. You know, abuse,
yeah,
molestation, somebody abandoning you.
yeah.
How do you forgive without using the word I forgive you?
By distinguishing who they authentically are.
Yay!
And first, with my clients, we distinguish who we inauthentically perceive them to be. Yeah. So like, for instance, I have a client just the other day, and she said, my father was so strict, for instance.
Mhm.
And that was something that she distinguished that was inauthentic. And she said, I realize you're not really being strict, you're being caring. You're
Okay. Yeah.
caring, because who would spend their time and energy unless they cared? So they're saying, do this because I want the best for you. Now, it might not be the best, effective means of getting the results that the father wants, but it's all he knows.
Well, okay. So that's a wonderful. I mean, that's not one of the most horrible cases of abuse. Although I had one um, guest on Love Letters Live, and she talked about how abusive her father was.
Yes.
And her father was so abusive, he was emotionally abusive and just devastating. The more she talked about him, and I asked her a couple of questions, she started to talk about the good times they had and the fun and how smart he. By the end of our time together, she said, you know, I could really like him if I let myself.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then she wrote a letter.
Right. Yeah. So, like when my case, I had, a father who wanted nothing to do with me. And I had a stepfather who was very abusive. And he was physically abusive, emotionally abusive. One time I was simply trying to tell him that my sister and I traded chores. So I said, oh, I didn't do the kitchen because my sister decided to do the kitchen. I'm going to do the living room. And he just started pushing me and pushed me down and kicking me in the stomach. And he didn't
Oh
want to
my
hear
goodness.
me. And it was very abusive.
And
And
you did have a very difficult personal reason for trying to guide other people through this.
oh yeah. And I've also had people, a person that I really, really trusted who, choked me so much that I almost died, and I had an out of body experience. But these people, I can honestly say, if they were in front of me right now, all I would have was compassion, because of this exercise, compassion, and I would have unconditional love for them because I would see who they authentically are and not who they're inauthentically are. And that's how I would relate to them because nobody wants to suffer, not even hardened criminals. They just don't understand a different way.
All right, so you're just touching on something that is, I think, so important, which is the compassion part. I had another, I'm going to send you a couple of links to but another man I know who was actually a bank robber. And I mean, he had just the most difficult, horrible life. His father was so physically abusive that this man, as a boy, went around pretty much full time with the concussions. And at one point, he tried to stop his father the only way he knew how, which was as he came at him, he stuck a knife in his neck, tried to kill him. They ended up friends. Somehow, this man, this young man, wonderful fellow, really, learned to understand the horror that his father had gone through and to understand it and to be compassionate. He ended up close.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a miracle, is it not?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, my stepfather pulled a, machine gun on me. So, yeah. But I have absolutely nothing but unconditional love for him. It's like, even in the preface of my book, I talk about the people in my life and how everybody had contributed. So there was those that gave me the unconditional love, like my grandmother, and they created that space or that foundation. It only takes really one person that allows you to stand solid on the ground so that you can deal with those challenges that come in. And but the thing is, those intruders in our lives are actually the ones that are our biggest allies because they give us the opportunity to grow. We need challenges. Without a breakdown, we can't have a breakthrough.
Oh, okay. I'm so glad. So, sometimes I hear people so concerned. A friend of mine, she was so concerned because her daughter was having a breakdown. It was so terrible. It was just awful. Her daughter was having a breakdown. I said, that's the good news. The good news is that she has refused to continue in this path that is going to smash her into a brick wall.
Yeah.
And so, I like what you're saying there. But the other thing is, when you let someone else off the hook with one of these letters of forgiveness, and you never use the word, when you let someone else off the hook, you're letting yourself off the hook, because whatever hook you've got someone else on, you're on that same hook.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. You're absolutely correct on that. So you're not agreeing. You're accepting the situation, right? And you're allowing it to be. It is what it is. You're not agreeing with it. And that way you retain your power to be a cause in the matter, which is very important. So yeah, you're not. And I always say this, people say, well, yeah, am I letting them off the hook? Am I saying it's okay? And I'm saying no, because here's the thing. You get to realize through this exercise, you get to realize that they have to continue to, they're going to continue to suffer until they decide to change, direction,
Yes.
right? So they have to live with themselves and the consequences of being inauthentic, being abusive, right? And they have to live with the consequences of that. And that's how they show up in the world. And that's how they treat themselves. They're abusing themselves as well as anybody else that comes into their way, because that's what they know to create. But they don't want to. They just don't know any other way.
Well, I'm thinking back, you're just kind of evoking so many memories of all these things you're talking about. In the very first workshop I ever did, there was a woman there. We talked, for quite a while about letters and why handwriting, which I'm going to ask you about. And she listened. And then when it was time to sit down and start writing thoughts as a, not a practice, but information gathering for what you want to say and how you feel, she looked up and she kind of growled. She said, "Can I write a hate letter?" And I said, "Sure, you can if you want. That's not what this workshop's about. Come talk to me before you start." She did. It turned out that she was feeling what she thought was hatred because this friend had just bailed on her, didn't answer any more phone calls, just turned away from her. It turns out in the conversation, it evolved that this woman, this friend who had bailed on her, had married, alas, a very abusive man whose first official act was to cut her off from all her friends, which is kind of a standard abusive practice. And it turns out that what she felt was enormous love, disappointed, not hatred, and ended up writing her a beautiful love letter, essentially understanding the situation this woman was living, and ended up by saying, you know, my door is always open to you when you can walk through it again. And that's what you're saying about distinguishing how we feel about things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, getting in touch with your experience of something is very important because you're unearthing that where the upset, you know, stems from. And at the same time, it's important to understand that the experience of something is not necessarily the truth. That's why I always say two people go to the movies, one, you know, they walk out and they go, that was the best movie I ever saw. The other one's like, that was the worst movie. Who's telling the truth?
Right. Okay. So you're talking about another very important thing, I think, which is clear thinking. Clear thinking, not letting yourself get muddled by hurt. Can't help it sometimes. Or, you know, elation. I want to talk to you about apologies. A letter of apology, which is kind of the first cousin to the letter of forgiveness, no?
Yeah, yeah, apologies. There's a true art to that as well.
Yes.
Absolutely. People don't understand. They go, "Oh, I'm sorry," and they think end of subject, right? It's
Oh,
like that, I'm done. I'm done apologizing. I'm sorry, and they just flippantly throw it out there to excuse, you know.
right. Either that or no apology has the word but in it.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
yeah,
so sorry I did that, but you know, I was, you know, or I'm so sorry I did that, but you know, you made me, uh-uh.
yeah, yeah.
And I think the basic point of an apology is, I am so sorry I did that. You didn't deserve it. And then you can just elucidate however you like. And a love letter, like I talk about, and maybe you also, is a real love letter is, I think, two things. Tell me what you think. It's one is putting your best self on paper. And you might ask, what is your best self? And I think we're going to agree on this. Your best self, I think, is that part of you that sees the best in others.
Mhm.
Yes?
Yeah.
You know,
Be
that's
able to identify that. Well, you know, it's an interesting thing that you say that identifying with others is because everybody's got kind of role models or people they, you know, really admire, right? And I tell people, I say, the reason why you admire those people is you see those qualities, that's you unself actualized, you know,
good
you're
point.
resonating with it because you're like, that's me, but I haven't experienced that within me yet. It hasn't become a
So
reason.
that would be kind of a nice thing to be able to say in a letter is, you know, I see these qualities in you. I hope that I can reach that someday.
Yeah, and but you have those seeds, you just haven't watered them yet, you know, so that it can
Yeah.
really grow. But they are you. That is a reflection of who you really are. You just haven't tended to that garden so that it can grow within you and you become it. And that's what, you know, this work is extraordinary because eventually you do get to the point to where you go, I don't aspire to be you. We are one. We are, you know, shoulder to
That's
shoulder.
a whole other wonderful level of sophistication.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's all there to be tapped into, you know. But with the art of, you know, forgiveness, I think it's very important. People don't realize it. It's like, for instance, I'll give you an example. This might probably explain it better, but it's like, you know what? I'm so sorry that I disappointed you because I want you to know that who I really am committed to being for you is someone who shows up that you can depend on. So I want you to know that I am committed to being that going forward. So if you could please forgive me, that would be wonderful. And that would allow me to, you know, move forward and show up as dependable because
That's
that's what
lovely.
I'm really committed to. You give the person you give the opportunity to the person to agree to
Lovely.
that. Yes, I
What do
do.
you think about, how do you gauge, because this is tricky and you see this a lot now. I mean, I must say, without wanting to get into anything political, but you do see a lot of people who have committed really rueful behavior, regretful things, politicians, and they get up and they apologize, and you can tell it's not sincere.
Yeah.
How do you gauge this? What makes an apology a truly sincere work of art?
When a person is able to establish, to distinguish what wasn't working and why, what was missing in them, that. So for instance, if I say, what's not working is that I didn't show up for you, or I didn't show up, I didn't return your call, whatever it is, this is what was missing.
Mhm.
And I learned from it. I realized that who I truly want to be is someone who can be counted on.
And
So
should making amends be tied to that somehow?
yeah, right. Is like distinguishing what was missing and how it was their responsibility and how they're recommitting to being, dependable or someone you can count on, that kind of thing. And that's
I had a
how you
friend
know.
long ago, many, many years. She was a good friend, and she really did something mean and awful. It was awful. And at some point, and I mean, it hurt the relationship. We hadn't spoken. She called me one day and she said, "I'm so sorry. I will never do that again."
Right.
And she never did. And the friendship was back on. It
That's
takes
it.
it takes really so little to repair things.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
do it right, doesn't it?
Yeah. You're right. It's that. Because if somebody is able to recognize that,
Yes.
then it's sincere.
There you
And
go. Yes.
they're making it clear for themselves as well as you.
Yes.
So
But
it's
the
hard
point
to.
is, human beings have a remarkable way of telling when something's not quite right or
Mhm.
sincere. You talk about well, okay, I have another question. This is so interesting. I know I'm going to want to talk to you longer, but we're limited in time. What about making people, you indicate somewhere, we're so on the same page about what we do. How do you make a criticism feel like not something critical? How do you correct someone without
Right.
making it feel like a criticism? That's an art as well.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think that what you do is first there's a couple of ways that I go about it. There's a thing that I call a possibility conversation, where like say two people are you're not on the same page, right? And so you go, you know what, we've known each other for 5 years now, and it has been extraordinary, and we've had amazing times, and we've had so much fun. Our relationship is really extraordinary. And what I see is that I think both of us are up to the same things. We want to have extraordinary times. We want to have love. We want to have laughter, right? Like, are we in agreement to this? Like, we want to have an amazing life, great times, right? Like, who's not going to say yes to that? Of course, everybody wants that, but you're establishing that. And then you go, and then you can say, but what I find that's interfering with that is that you're not taking responsibility, you're not acting with integrity, you're not being your word, and that interferes with us being able to experience all these wonderful things. So that's what I think is kind of missing or out of
Now,
alignment.
you do have to trust somebody a lot to be able to say that, because in fact that is critical.
Yeah, right. But establishing that background and realizing that you're up to the same things in life, and you're not saying you're bad or wrong. You're just saying this is what's missing. This is what's out of alignment that doesn't
Okay.
support causing what we're up to. So if we can look to see at shifting that and saying, like, because we're in agreement about what we want. So that's the only thing that's missing here.
So
And
that you've set it up in such a way that we can kind of equate with that with a little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down.
right, because it's not like you're not personally attacking somebody. You're saying that this way of being doesn't support, and we have the possibility of being anything and everything. I mean, that we're creative human beings. So choosing to be this way doesn't actually support, it's not in alignment to what we're up to. So I am, making a proposal here. I'm saying, I'm suggesting, and what are your thoughts on it? That if we are being our word, both of us, then it's going to work beautifully, right? So can we agree to that? Something along those lines.
Lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you in your private work with people, uh do you meet in groups to do this, or how do you function?
Yeah, I work one-on-one with clients. I also have group sessions as well. I do weekends, retreats. I
Me
mean, I
too.
work with corporations. I work with businesses and small businesses, large businesses, like anything from, the Beverly Wilshire Hotel to Google to the Lifetime Channel. And I've also worked with like just entrepreneurship, small business, boutique businesses so that they can really be effective. And everybody, there's no reason why a company can't have a lot of fun and be a joyous experience and be incredibly successful and productive as well.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for doing this with me. I've
Absolutely.
it's so nice to meet kind of a like-minded.
We're kindred spirits.
Thank you. That was the word I couldn't find. Kindred spirits. Yes.
Yeah, and I love it. Thank you.
Sounds like we're doing the same thing. Now, I want to just do my little commercial for something, if you don't mind. I
All
hear
right.
people so often say, you probably do too, we may have said it. Oh, I just wish I had a magic wand, when you're facing some kind of trouble. And my response to this is, you've got one. This is it. The magic wand that will let you write just the letter you need to write to make things better. So I just encourage, like you do, for people to write those letters and handwriting. Do you have a feeling about that before we say goodbye?
Oh, absolutely. That connects the heart with the mind.
Oh, good.
The
Okay.
creative process, typing is quite impersonal. This is a very personal thing. You're actually creating when you're writing.
And people feel that when they get handwritten letters, you hear about it. Okay, thank you. I see, I think handwriting is like really the thumbprint of the heart. I mean, nobody has the same handwriting. Everybody's got lucid and bright. It's something special when you do. You're something special. Thank you, honey.
Thank you, Janet.
I hope now that we've met, our paths will cross again.
Absolutely. I would love that.
Me too. Okay, goodbye. Mwah. Take good care of yourself and take good care of everybody else you're taking care of.
I will. Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.